today as the guest speaker is Wendy Beecham. She's the CEO of Watermark, a network of women leader in variety of professional field. She is here to speak to us about marketing versus strategy and branding. She has over 25 years of leadership experience in electronics publishing. She also has been named one of the 25 influential business women in the Bay Area. You should follow her on Twitter. I'm sure she will post her Twitter on the slide. Let's introduce. Can you come up?
I went out and interviewed naming firms in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I interviewed 3 different firms, and the firm we selected was called Eat My Words. A very creative individual named Alexandra Watkins, who founded this firm. She actually entered a contest and won, it's from American Express, Make Mine a Million. So she won a grant in order to start her company. Previously, before that, she was in marketing in corporate America. The reason that we selected Alexandra's firm is that the creativity of the brief that she gave us with regards to the process she was going to use and the depth of the process that she was going to use was incredibly impressive to me. So I thought we would end up with the best result with her work. And so I highly recommend, if you look at her website, it's just really, there's a lot of great information, and the names that she's come up with for some of her clients are just incredibly inventive. So the first thing that we did with Alexandra was we reviewed the strategy. So that's where we started. She sent me this massive questionnaire with a lot of questions about our customers, our services, and we had done all of that work because we had just completed the strategy initiative. So I was able to give her a lot of very detailed information in order for her to start the process. And the objective was to develop a smart, high-quality, confident new name that made a strong emotional connection with current and past members. So that was the objective that she was given. And we started off with the description of who we were as an organization, a network of accomplished women, exceptional women leaders who were seeking a peer group in order to create connections so that they could enhance their impact in the community. They wanted to foster intimate connections between the members as opposed to just feeling like it was a networking group where you would go to a meeting and exchange a business card. This was much more about giving each other, sharing best practices, giving each other leads, really having a peer group to discuss the challenges that they might face after being one of only 3 VPs in a billion-dollar company, 3 women VPs in a billion-dollar company. Those kinds of things were what they were trying to be able to communicate with each other. We wanted the name to be able to communicate those attributes. The experience that we wanted to put across was one of high quality. We wanted it to feel exclusive as an organization, but in an inclusive way. That was very important to us. We didn't want to feel like the Bohemian Club, if you've heard of that organization, where it's a bunch of men that meet in the woods once a year, and you have to, get a secret handshake to get in. We wanted it to feel much more inclusive, but for people, though, to feel that you've reached a certain level of achievement in order to be able to participate. It was about expanding horizons, about growing and advancing, looking up and out, and being forward moving. And the other thing that Alexandra did for us was she educated us about the importance of understanding what a name can and can't do for you. The name is not everything. If you think of names that you recognize in the marketplace, if you think of the name Nike, if it wasn't associated with the brand, with the products, Nike on its own doesn't mean anything to you. Google, names like this, there's a lot that goes into the communication of a name in addition to the name itself. So what a name can do is create a positive brand experience, command attention, evoke imagery, generate a buzz, and make an emotional connection. That's what a name can do. And that's why it's important to really understand who your customers are, who the products are, all of those aspects of the strategy, so that when you choose the name, you're making sure that it really ties back to what you do as a business. What a name can't do, that was our old branding associated with the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs and Executives. It can't say everything. We were trying to. It was a forum for women entrepreneurs. You know, it was too descriptive, but not in a positive way. A name can't explain itself. We don't expect Google to explain itself, and yet through its actions, we know what it means. It can't appeal to everybody. We knew that there were some people that were not going to like the name. That was a given, especially when you had such a long history with the organization. So don't try and pick something that you think everybody is absolutely going to like. It can't survive without support, and I'll describe more about what I mean by that when we get into the branding and the marketing piece of it. And then it can't overcome the brand shortcomings. So you can't call yourself the Ritz Hotel and be just an organization that doesn't have the brand attributes of the Ritz Hotel. So it's one of these things that the name has to match what you feel you're delivering to the customer. So where we ended up was with the name Watermark. And these also were very important attributes that each name that we selected had to fulfill. It had to be simple, meaningful, visual, positive, emotional. You had to be able to spell it. You had to be able to pronounce it, and there had to be a trademark available for the name. And I was very lucky because I had a Swedish member of my team. And so some of the names that we were looking at before we came up with Watermark, she had difficulty saying. So that in itself, okay, if you can't say it, then it's not appropriate. And the process that Alexandra took us through, after I went through the initial strategy work with her, she actually sent us a list of about 120 names to select from. And I had a committee of 3 people working with me on this project. And she gave us a ranking system for the names. And we all ranked the names, every single name on this rating system. And then we had a meeting, which she led us through, where we came up with the top 10 names. And then we had to sell each other on why we liked the particular name that we ended up with on that list. And by going through that process, it was very easy to come to a consensus around Watermark. This was not my first choice of a name. And yet, by hearing people's, they're giving their case about why they felt it was a very positive name, it was a wonderful collaborative process, and I think we ended up in an amazingly wonderful place. But what we did was we did take those 10 names to check the trademarks of them in case there was an issue with Watermark. There is a church in Texas called Watermark. But it's not in the same space that we're in. We're a nonprofit association for women leaders, and so there was not a conflict. But they did own the URL for Watermark, watermark.org, and so that caused us to get creative when we came up with our URL, which I will share with you a bit further on. But the key thing is that all of these aspects of what needs to be in a name were a wonderful checkpoint to make sure that this name was going to work. Really powerful stuff. So this process took about 3 months. The initial strategy work took about 6 months. This process took about 3 months. Some of it was because of the scheduling of the other team members, but we had a name. It's like, okay, great, we have a name. Now what are we going to do? So the next thing... Oh, I'm sorry, I want to go through this briefly with you. The name Watermark, the reason we selected the name Watermark is because when you look at our audience, we were trying to have a name that enabled people to think about reaching a certain level, because the peer group in the audience are women that have achieved a certain level of success. So when you think of a watermark, it could be a level of water. But also, a watermark is a symbol of quality on paper, and it's an impact on the paper. And so all of those things were really a wonderful description of women in our audience who've reached a certain level that are making an impact. And so it just had a really great synergy with what it was that we were wanting to communicate to the marketplace. So that's why we selected the name Watermark. It's elegantly complex. I love that language. So you can get a bit impressed with the process at times going through this because of the play on words that you end up with as you go through all of these different steps. But in the end, it's really, I'm a member of the organization myself, and it's about how it made me feel as we went through this process as well, which was really powerful. So the next step was we had to do something with the name. We had to look at how did we want to represent the name out in the marketplace? What was the look and the feel that was going to keep the brand together as far as what we wanted the name to mean? So we selected a firm called Moving Brands, and their tagline is creativity for a moving world. And that was important to us because of the world in which we live in today. We have to communicate across many different media types. And so we wanted to make sure that what we did with the brand really did transfer from print to online to social media to in-person. And so we really paid attention to the direction that we got from them. Moving Brands is a British firm that's just opened an office here in the US, and we had a team in the UK as well as here in the US working on our project, which was really wonderful to have that international perspective as we went through it. There was some really different creative that they came up with because we had a global perspective to the creation of the material. But their charter was to make Watermark a living, breathing identity for the organization. We wanted to pay attention to the look, the feel, and the behavior, what the communication plan would be for this huge change, and how we would launch the new name to the marketplace. So that's where Moving Brands work stepped in. So the first thing we did when we started working with Moving Brands is we reviewed all the strategy work that we had done, that 6 months worth of work. And I can't tell you how powerful that was, and it just jump-starts the whole process because they really need to get under the skin of who you are as an organization, who's your audience, how do you serve them, what makes you different, all of those questions. And we had done all of that work. And so that, again, was really powerful to have started with that. But then I also shared with them all the work we'd done with Alexandra, because she had taken our strategy work and turned it on its head to fit the work that she was doing for the naming. So by the time we educated Moving Brands, we were able to do it very quickly because we had so much data already prepared and they weren't having to try and draw it out of us. But they also had so much data that the quality of the work that they were able to give us was very powerful. So that's a really strong message that I would send, is it's always about, if you spend the time planning ahead of time, you're going to move forward faster, and this is a perfect example of that process. So the opportunities for the branding were many, because the organization had developed over the course of 15, 20 years with about 6 different CEOs who'd all put their own imprint on it. So we had quite a bit of a hodgepodge going on as far as the look and the feel and all of the different means of communicating, and it was not really very cohesive. And so they really wanted to take a look at the colors that we were using, the way that we were overloading our members with emails and other information because of how we were communicating. Our website and our blog, the email shots, all of that activity had to be raised the bar with regards to the professionalism. And then they talked with us too about the external aspects of what we were creating, if there needed to be something that was not in print or online as a way of communicating with our members. And then talk with us again about the communication plan here. So this was the overarching remit of what we worked on with Moving Brands. So did I skip ahead here? Let me just see. One of the things that came to light very early on was when they placed our competitive analysis against the color wheel. All of our competitors are on the left-hand side. Lots of pinks and purples in there when you look at women's leadership organization. Nobody was using the color wheel on the right-hand side, and nobody was using black and white. And so by doing that exercise, it really highlighted some interesting information for us as far as where we could play to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace. And then they started looking at other types of imagery around the actual meaning of the brand. So they really got into Watermark being a level, an impression, an ink blot, a benchmark. All of these things, it was important for them to pull this visual imagery out because they were looking at ways of tying the brand to the emotional connection of the customer, but it also was helping them look at different ways of illustrating the brand visually as far as how we printed the name. We looked at the characters for Watermark. So it's made up of special women connecting through events in order to be able to enhance their impact through teaching and learning from each other. So they were, again, looking at visual imagery that was of the right quality, that was going to deliver the right message visually to the marketplace. We started looking at the brand behavior. We wanted it to be sophisticated. So again, looking at the visual images that they pulled to go with the word sophisticated, so that we're both elegant and efficient. You know, really looking at who is the audience, how do they act. And the purpose of doing this was, again, as a member of the organization, if you looked at this, would it resonate with you? Would you look at that and say, yes, that's me? So if we were naming a new toolbox, we would go through this same exercise, because it would be a case where the audience who would be buying that toolbox would have to really resonate with the behavior that the name designated that was associated with the toolbox. So even though we're a service, this relates to any type of naming and branding exercise. We then looked at the fact that we wanted our audience feels resilient, that they respond easily and effortlessly, and that there's a lot of navigation that goes through in the lives that they lead. They want close connections. And we really wrestled with this word because using words like intimate and close could mean negative things to people that might not want that much of a connection with a business professional peer group. But we like the word close because what we see with our audience is the deeper connections that they make in business turn into deep friendships that then transcend time. And so we felt that close was really an appropriate word to use. There's momentum. They feel a momentum of moving forward, taking their businesses forward. And emanating influences. This is an important concept. It's where I meet someone today and someone has a need and I make a referral to them. It's like, oh, I would like to give more presentations so that I can have my company be better known in the marketplace. Oh, well, there's 3 different organizations that you should meet. And then through that, they meet someone else who perhaps becomes a client. So it's that whole emanating influences. You don't know where the connections are going to lead and what else might happen, but it just continues to feed on itself and continues to build and grow. So again, these were all, it was a way of building up to what the brand should be. Then we went into mood boards. These are actual photographs of the mood boards that they put together down at Moving Brands offices. And so you can see that they really just they were looking at different words, they were looking at different styles, they were looking at many different ways of representing what we were trying to put across. We looked at different styles of photography. And they were very much focused on the fact that they wanted to have photos of strong, confident women that did not seem too professional. None of these women are looking directly at the camera. There's a lot of interest and a lot of a uniqueness to the women that are here in these photos. So they were trying to develop a sense of what our photography could look like that we were to use. And then they looked at thousands and thousands of different W's and the way W's were represented. And it was important to do this as well because if you think of the W Hotel, that is a very distinctive name with a W in it. Women's Wear Daily has a very distinctive W in it. So again, we had to make sure that our W wouldn't get confused with another W out there in the marketplace. So all kinds of things like this that we had to pay attention to. And they also looked at the layout of the words on a page to see, you know, what was going to be most striking to fit the brand identity for the way that the words were represented. And they started playing with all of these different things to come up with a symbol for us to use to go with the name Watermark. And what we ended up with was something that was very clean and simple. It's Georgia 10 is the typeface, and it's very spaced apart, so it looks very elegant and sophisticated, and yet very simple and classic. And so this is where we ended up. And then you can see we added a tagline for exceptional women. And the reason we added that tagline is because our former name was the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs and Executives. And we had some members of our audience who were very concerned that the new name did not have the name women in it. And so this is really one of those transition points where we have a tagline, a strapline that we're using now in order to create the transition from the old name to the new name. But in the future, we envision that this strapline won't be needed anymore. It really is just a transition point to get us from the old name to the new name and where we're taking the organization. The new name also is viewed to be more inclusive in the marketplace because it doesn't specifically have the name women in it. Because we do have men attend our events, and men are welcome to attend events that we hold. But many of them did not feel welcome because of the name women in the organization previously. So that's been one of the positive benefits, is that it's been more inclusive to not have the word women specifically in the name. And then the symbol that we ended up with is this very elegant W, and it connects, but the lines don't actually join. It's that emanating influence that we were trying to get across again, that it just keeps flowing and building. And so we use the symbol as well as the name as we move forward with the brand identity. This was our old website. And it was pretty bad in that there was a lot of content on it. We were trying to really communicate as much as we possibly could. Had a lot of blue on it. And the highlights we used for the linking was the same color blue as the text. So that made it difficult to know when you were clicking on a link. And then the pictures are very corporate. You know, it's just kind of boring, actually, you know. And it got the point across, but it was not that sophisticated. This is our new website. So it looks more like a newsletter. It's much cleaner. It's very easy to see. These are upcoming events. The blog is center stage. The Twitter feed is center stage. So there's a lot of movement of content and refreshment that happens just by having RSS feeds set up to other parts of the organization. So this was a great way for us to have something that was very modern looking and fresh without a lot of staff time to have to create a lot of content because it was being created by our audience. We have our link to the social media channels up here, photos from events, a special program, and then a testimonial down here from a member. So again, the other thing we were doing is we wanted to have members highlighted more on the homepage so that people could look at that and say, yes, this is someone like me. I think I belong to this organization. So that's a big shift, and it's made a huge difference from what we had previously. And then you see how the branding is represented on the website as well. And then the photos that we did were much more open, more modern. There's other photos on the website where we're in different poses. We have very specific guidelines. There's a 225-page document with all the branding guidelines that came out of this exercise. And the photography and how it's represented was one of them. These are my team members, as well as myself, Elisa Marie, and Alyssa, Director of Connections and my Manager of Operations. And then these are the new e-newsletters that we send out. And so, again, we're trying to put a lot less information on the newsletters and link people back to the website for the content in order to drive traffic to the website, as opposed to giving them all the information in the newsletter. And we found that we have seen an increase in event registration because of the change to the newsletters that we send out. And our blog is updated weekly. And we have different authors for the blog. Previously, I was the main author for the blog. Now we have members. We have our speakers blogging. We use video. We do a lot more linking out to other media and other sources, and using more photography and imagery in the material so that it's more visually appealing. And so it's a very different look and feel than we had previously. And in the social media as well, what we're doing here is maintaining the brand identity through our social media channels. We have a Facebook page, we have a LinkedIn page, we have private groups on LinkedIn. The Twitter feed is @Watermark, WTRMRK. And so that enables us to go ahead and just link all of the social media points together. We post videos on YouTube, we've got our photos on Flickr, and the whole thing just feeds into the website homepage so that we're continually refreshing and updating through all those different media channels. And it was really Moving Brands. They had a social media strategist on their team, and she was amazing in working with us to really understand how to do this effectively and efficiently, because there's only 3 of us on the team. And I do work with a group called Social Tribe. It's a startup organization that assists organizations in developing their social media. So they support us in getting the blogs written and doing the tweeting and things like that, because I spend probably 4 hours a day in my car. So it's pretty hard for me to tweet when I'm driving. And so basically what I do is I send a lot of fodder to Tatiana, the woman on Social Tribe, and she'll tweet through the day. And then when I can, I add my tweets in as well, just so that there's constant tweeting going on. And we have goals that we set for the tweets and the Facebook visitors that we get and things like that, just to keep building the traffic. We do find with our audience that Facebook is not a major channel for us. Our demographic tends to skew a bit older, and so they tend to use LinkedIn more than Facebook. We do have some of our audience that live on Facebook, and so that's why it's important for us to cross all channels, but we do get a lot more activity in LinkedIn than we do on Facebook. And Twitter is pretty consistent as well. We have a lot of members that are fairly consistent Twitter users, and they retweet a lot of the information we send through. So the result of this was that on September 29th last year, we launched the new brand. And the way that we chose to do it was nobody knew the name. We did not release the name to anyone. It was just the board of the organization who knew the name prior to the launch. And the reason we did that, we were counseled very carefully on that, because if you tell somebody, if somebody says to you, what's the new name, and you say Watermark, they're going to say, I hate it. Hate it. Because you haven't given them anything around it. You haven't given them the concept of all of the things that I shared with you about what it means with regards to it being about a certain level and having an impact and all those kinds of things. And if they don't understand that, then they're going to hate the name. And they'll never like it after that. So the launch of a new name it's so critical not to just tell somebody what the name is. So what we did was we held an event with Nancy Brinker, Ambassador Nancy Brinker, who is the founder of Susan G. Komen, the breast cancer organization. She'd just written a new book, and so she was our keynote speaker. She herself has been an executive in her career. She started this amazing foundation that's had this superlative impact on women with breast cancer and in the world. And so she was the perfect epitome of what the brand identity was. She was an illustration of the brand herself. And so it was a very motivating evening to hear her personal story and to have her present to the audience. And then after she presented, I came up and I gave a very brief headline about what the name, why we had changed the name, more the story of why we changed the name. And then I played a short video that Watermark had created for us, that Moving Brands had created for us. It was all in black and white, and it had all the images that I had shared with you previously. And then the name Watermark just came up on the screen. And I was standing, there was an audience of about 450 people, and there was a visible reaction in the audience. It makes me emotional to think about it, because it could have gone the other way. It could have been that everybody was like, what is that? But there was a visible reaction, like people were like, yes, and it really resonated with them. So we were really proud of the work that we did. And then we had new banners that we had on the stage, and we did a lot to rebrand the event that night. The new website went live when I played the video. So when people left the event and they went to look up the website, the new website was launched. So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes before this launch happened. And some of the funny things that went on is that Ben, who was our main contact at Moving Brands, his wife had a baby, their second child, the week before the event. And then Laura, who was also one of our main workers at Moving Brands, she got this major skin rash. And then Brandon, who was building our website, got a huge spider bite and got a staph infection and got admitted into the hospital like 3 days before we were due to launch. And I'm just like, what else can go wrong here, But it's one of those things that, you just go with the flow, and you've got people in place and you're just assuming that it's all going to work out great. So we were very, very lucky that it did, and everybody ended up being fine. But the feedback that we've received from our audience is that they like the new name, that they feel that it is elegant and sophisticated, it's simple, it's a lot easier to say than Forum for Women Entrepreneurs and Executives. It rolls off your tongue more. But we have had a lot of new members join since September because they feel like something new is happening at the organization. It's revitalized the organization. We also launched a new program in December, the Watermark Institute Board Access Program, which is specifically to provide women with the tools and resources to empower them to get public and private board seats. So in addition to the name, we launched some new services that were also linked into cementing the values of the brand and what we were putting forward as well. So it wasn't just the name and the marketing that changed. We also introduced new services. I've attracted new sponsors to the organization, and one of the main points that they make is that they feel it's more inclusive, and so they do feel more comfortable sponsoring the organization because of that. And we've seen an increase in event attendance because people are more easily able to see what we're doing and are more interested in what we're doing because it's more visually appealing to them than what we had been doing before. So the overarching result is that it's been a very positive experience. It took a village. It was one of the most intense things. It's almost like I don't have children, but I would imagine it was like having a baby because the whole thing took about 9 months, and especially with what happened the week before the event was pretty intense. But it's something that I feel personally proud of, and I feel proud of for the organization. And I'd never shared this story before, and I wanted to be able to take you on the journey because I think there's a lot of interesting lessons here about the importance of really knowing your customers and really speaking to them and understanding the strategy, how to choose a name and what's important when you choose a name, and how a branding exercise is critical when you launch a new name to make sure that the whole message ties together and reflects back what the meaning of the name is to the audience. So that was really what I wanted to share with you today, and I'm very happy to answer any questions you have about this or women's leadership issues or anything else. Okay, thank you.
I wanted to ask, how did you prioritize this project?
It was part of the overarching strategy work that we did. And so the 3 main focus areas that came out of the strategy work were about the name and the identity were holding us back in a major way because people were not resonating with it, and it was causing them to feel that they weren't associated with the organization. So that's why it became a high priority for us. The second thing was the launch of a new service around the board access program, which we did at the same time. So we launched that in December of last year. So the business planning work for that was done at the same time with a different team as this work was being done. And then the third thing was around member engagement and increasing ways that we could connect members with each other without it having to be just with staff enabling that to happen. And so we launched some new services around that as well. So that's really, it was through the strategy work that we looked at the things that were going to have the biggest impact on us from the perspective of attracting and retaining members and financially broadening the resources of the organization because, as I mentioned, so much of our funding comes from sponsorship. And so I wanted to find different revenue streams, and the new board access program does that. And then by expanding the way members can interact with us, it's enabled us to charge differently for services. So it was all interrelated in that way.
Could you expand on the idea of what the risk you felt changing the name, and because you said it was secret until that very point,
yeah.
So there must have been a risk you felt up to that, and how did you deal with it?
Right, and I think that we did use members of our board in order to work with us on the name, and our board is representative of the members that we have. So they covered the different audiences that we serve: entrepreneur, executive, investors, board members, and partners in professional services firms. But this, again, I go back to the strategy work that we did. We did a huge customer survey as part of the strategy work, in addition to the interviews and the focus groups. And so it really did feel like we had a lot of information from the market already. And when you're doing something like changing a name, you really can't do it with a big committee because you'll never reach consensus. And so you have to have the faith that you've done the research and that you really do know enough about the market in order to make the right decision. And the work that Alexandra had us do as well was really deep diving beyond what we had done in the strategy to make sure that we really understood who our market was and what we wanted the name to be associated with.
About how large is your organization now, and has there been a considerable growth since your name was changed?
Yeah, we have about 500 members, and we're up to, I think, 22 sponsor organizations. And we just launched the new name in September, so there hasn't been like a significant measurable jump, but it's probably been at least 5% growth in membership since then, and the renewal rate has definitely increased as well. People feel a new energy and a buzz, and they want to be part of it. So I'll have a better answer for you next September, this September, because it's too soon. But I will say that I was able to raise $100,000 more in revenue in the first 2 months of this year than I did in the first 2 months of last year. And part of that obviously is because of the economy shift, but I think another part of it has to do with the new name and branding. So a mix of the two.
So you have mentioned your hardships in changing the names. So how do you organize your team, or how do you encourage your team member to work to their full capacity?
Well, through process and communication, I think is the best way of answering that. We set very specific goals that we want to achieve with regards to both on an annual basis, and then we break that down into monthly targets. And then everybody has a clearly defined role on the team, which makes it easy to understand where each of us separately need to go off and do, but then where we also intersect. So I have weekly one-on-ones with my team members, and then we have weekly group meetings, and we have weekly communication meetings with the social tribe team as well, just so that we can really make sure that the priorities that we have set are in line with what's really happening at that moment in time. So it's a mix of all of those different things. Does that answer your question? Is that what you meant? Okay.
What was the process before you acknowledged you needed to change the brand?
What was the process?
What was the process that led to acknowledging that you needed
to change the name? Yeah, we did. It was about a 6-month process where we were doing a complete strategy review. And so it was a mix of different activities that we did. We did a customer survey, and we had about a 23% response rate to that. So I was really happy with the quality of the content we got from that. But then we did one-on-one interviews across the constituents, that we did focus groups with different constituents together. We did a full day focus group type of thing with those people. We did a full competitive analysis about the other organizations in the marketplace, and what their names were, what their offerings were, who their members were, all of those kinds of things. Because the question that we wanted to answer was, how can we differentiate ourselves, and how can we be most relevant for the marketplace? And it was through all of those activities, and we did the financial analysis as well. So when you wrapped all of that up, the end result was that the name wasn't serving us anymore. It felt old-fashioned, it was cumbersome, and it was not speaking to our members as far as how they described themselves anymore. And so that led to the new name at that point. But it was with a board. I have a board of 11 board members, and so it was definitely, they were part. We did a whole separate strategy session with the board, and then it was through the conclusions that we came to that would be one of the top priorities that we needed to focus on.
You said that when you narrowed down your top 10 choices, you said Watermark wasn't your first choice.
Yeah.
I was wondering, what was your first choice, and what led you to switch?
To switch.
Yeah.
My first choice was tapestry, and the reason that I liked the word tapestry was because in my mind it designated the mixing of different approaches, different ways of doing things together to be a greater whole. So that's what that meant to me. But the more that we talked about Watermark, the more that I felt that tapestry might be viewed as too feminine. And I was concerned that that was actually, we wanted something that was a bit more neutral than what tapestry would mean. And so that's really why I switched to Watermark. And I really do feel, after going through all the other work that we went through, I really do feel that it was the right name for the organization, yeah.
How much did it cost for you to hire outside firms to rename
I
your
know,
company?
that was a good question. So I don't want to tell you exactly how much we paid because they charge differently when they don't charge nonprofits. But what I will say is that we did a mix of bartering with each other so that as part of the work, we would introduce them to specific clients so that they would then be able to get more business for the work they were doing with us. I will say with Moving Brands, it was a huge, they're just opening an office here in the US. So it was huge exposure for them to be highlighted at an event with 400 of the top companies in Silicon Valley, 400 people from the top companies in Silicon Valley at that event, and they did get business from participating with us. So the whole process itself between the two firms was less than $75,000. And we did have a reserve fund at the organization. We still do have a reserve fund. Financially, we were in a very good state because I'm a former CEO of a $200 million business, and running this organization is like running a startup. So it's all about cash and cash management and cost containment. And so I run a really tight ship, basically. So we had really good funds in reserve, and it was something where it wasn't going to put us at risk to spend the money.
At any point during the process, was there a backup plan as far as if the name wasn't deemed successful? Or is it more of like, we chose this and we're going to implement it?
That's correct. You choose and you implement. At the point when you have any concerns, that's at the point when you choose the name. Once you go into the branding work with Moving Brands, you've reached the past the point of no return. You have to feel confident of the name before you move into the branding and communication. Yeah, and that's really why, again, Alexandra's process was really strong in that way, because she really has a lot of mechanisms of looking at it from the business perspective, the emotional perspective, to make sure that you feel confident that it's the right name. And when we launched, the committee launched the name to the board, the biggest issue was that it didn't have the word women in it. And I felt really strongly that it shouldn't. And so the compromise was to have the strapline. And Alexandra was a part of that process as well. Because she was guiding us with regards to when you use a strapline and when you don't. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.